Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about bed fishing. We obviously ain't talking about these type of beds, but we're talking about bass beds or other fish, but mostly bass beds. I know it's a controversial subject. A lot of people don't agree with bed fishing. That's not what I'm contending today, whether you agree with it or not. None of my business. But if you are a bed fisherman and you want to learn how to do it a little bit better, let's go through it here today. Oh, I got one. Hey guys, so there's a lot of mystery to bed fishing. A lot of people don't like bed fishing, they don't agree with it, whatever. But it is part of the game. You know, and done responsibly, you're going to be fine. You're not going to hurt the fish. You no more than catching them, tongue hooking them, doing something else. So anyhow, if you want to learn how to bed fish, we're going to go through it today. It's not that hard, although it is a patience game a lot of times. So the first thing that I would say about bed fishing that's very important is when you first locate a fish, if you can locate that fish without him locating you, you're ahead of the game already. And a lot of times I find that if I can make a first cast pretty much right on him before he knows that I'm there and catch him by surprise, that's the best cast that you can make bed fishing. That very first one, accurate, on time, from a distance where he doesn't realize that you're there. You'll catch that fish on that cast more than any other cast, bed fishing. But let's talk about different ways to catch them on bed fishing. It's not the same. There's not just like one way to go approach a bed and catch a fish. First of all, there's the setup. You have to set up on the fish properly. And the best way to set up on the fish is if you have a dock or something that you can get next to, behind, or something to approach that fish and get tied off or parapoled down, that's going to act as a buffer that he's used to being there anyhow, so he won't find you intimidating. The other way to set up on a fish is, usually you want to set up with the sun to your back, but you don't want your shadow on the fish. If you get your shadow on the fish, his instinct is to not get in shallow water when shadows come flying over him, because that's a predator. So you definitely don't want your shadow on him, but that sun to your back or sun overhead behind you is going to be the best way to set up on them if it's possible. It's not always possible. Sometimes these fish are set up in a way that the only way you can present to them is you have to be down sun from them. And you almost always want to, if you have parapoles on your boat and you can parapole, it's not too deep, then you want to parapole down. You want to turn your electronics off. You don't want your electronics bouncing off of this fish and pinging off of this fish. Turn all that stuff off bed fishing. So that's part of the setup of the deal, actually setting up on the fish. And your approach to catching the fish, like I said, that first cast is key. If you don't get them on that first cast, then what you want to do is next thing you want to do is you want to read the fish, and you want to see if he's even catchable. So if you pull up on the fish and the fish swims off of the bed and comes right back to the bed, he's catchable. If that fish doesn't swim off the bed and stays right there, he's really catchable. If the fish swims off of the bed and he doesn't come right back, or you don't see him for a little while, just go find another fish. You can come check him again later. He's not committed yet. So, you can make some blind cast around the bed if you want, just to see maybe if you can trigger that fish. But for the most part, as far as bed fishing, looking at the fish to try to catch him off of the bed goes, if he won't stay there, if he won't come back, he's pretty much one that you just need to write off for now in the day. So then what you want to do is, after you set up on the fish, you've decided that this fish is catchable. Depending on the time of the day, the size of the fish, you got to ask yourself, how much time am I willing to commit to trying to catch this fish? If you're fishing for fun and you just want to learn, just stay there till you catch him. Figure it out. That's the best way to learn how to catch bedfish, is actually just do it. So you can present a lot of things to a bedfish. And I'm going to talk about the different lures and stuff that you can use to catch bedfish. But before we talk about the lures, let's talk about the technique of catching a bedfish. And probably the easiest technique to catch a bedfish is if a bedfish is locked on. This works if he's locked on. If he's not locked on, it's not going to be easy. But if you got a bedfish that's locked on, in other words, he's sitting there on the bed and he's not moving when you cast to the bed. He's like in a trance almost. The best way to catch that fish that I have found over the years is to throw your lure over the fish, pull it back to him, and bump him. And bump him, and bump him, and bump him. And keep bumping him with your lure. And you know, how many times are you going to let somebody poke you in the chest before you've just simply had enough? And he will respond, and he would usually respond 10 to 25 bumps probably, but he's usually going to respond. Very rarely can you not get a fish to respond after you've bumped him several times. You know, you're going to see him get more and more agitated. The first time you bump him, he may not even move. And then the next couple times you bump him, he may twitch a little bit, and then he'll start, you know, you'll bump him and he'll make a circle and stop right back in the bed again. And then, you know, he may even swim off and come back after you bumped him several times, but he always comes right back to the same spot. And you keep bumping him, you will catch that fish. He'll turn on it, he'll bite it, and you'll catch him. And in that situation, you know, it really doesn't matter what lure you throw. You're just irritating him into biting. And then the next technique for catching a bedfish is finding the sweet spot. And a lot of people talk about this. The sweet spot on a bass bed, the place where that fish has identified that it wants to drop its eggs, can sometimes be the size of a quarter or a 50-cent piece. It may be one piece of shell or one rock or the end of a stick or the end of a lily pad root, something that's been just cleaned off really good, and that's where they're like, it's going to stick, that's where I'm going to lay it. And if you keep putting your bait on that sweet spot and shaking it, the fish sooner or later is going to go, I'm sick and tired, I've cleaned this thing off I don't know how many times now, and this stupid crawfish, this stupid bluegill, this stupid salamander, whatever, keeps swimming up and messing up my whole deal. And so he's gonna get you. And you know, depending on the fish's mood, you know, this could take 5 minutes to 2 hours to catch a fish like that. And so when you put it on the sweet spot, what you have to identify, and how do you identify the sweet spot? You identify the sweet spot to what the fish reacts to. You know, if you shake it through the left side of the bed and he's just in a trance, you shake it through the right side of the bed and he's in a trance, you shake it through the middle of the bed and he's just in a trance, and then you kind of quarter that a little bit and you get about halfway through and you see him he'll kind of turn. And you'll be like, well, you just got his attention. And sometimes you can't get his attention with certain lures, so you got to go through different lures. Now, I understand some people have their favorite lures. You look at, like on the Elite Series right now, Drew Benton and Drew Cook are considered two of the best Elite Series pros at sight fishing, and rightly so. They catch them and they catch big bags doing it. They've identified the little nuances that they need to identify. But both of them, you know, they swear by this Big Bites Fighting Frog, which is basically just a beaver style creature bait that they use to irritate these fish with. So now that we know how to approach the bed and set up on it, identifying the fish's, you know, whether he has any interest in it at all, or whether he's catchable, and identifying the two main type of techniques to catch fish off of the bed, let's talk about what lures are effective. Well, most any lure is effective, and a lot of it depends on, can you see your lure and will the fish respond to the lure that you're throwing. And it may not always be, you know, the same lure that you caught the last fish on. It may be a different one. Like I said, Benton and Cook, they're kind of counting on one and just sticking with it, and that's working for them for now. But there'll come a time when they'll have to change up also. So one of the keys to bed fishing baits is that the bait would not have excess amounts of appendages. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times with these bedfish, they just kind of mouth the bait. And if there's a lot for them to grab a hold of, you know, a lot of times you're going to set the hook and you're going to miss the fish because they've just grabbed a tentacle or a claw or a strand or something like that. So, you know, a more compact bait, once he actually bites it, you're going to have a way higher hookup percentage on that particular bait than you are on some of these big appendage baits. You know, like a lizard. A lizard draws a lot of strikes on bedding fish, but you miss a lot of those fish because there's so much going on a lot of times, you know, with the tail and the flappy arms and the head, and he may grab it by any of those, and then, you know, you come back and the arms ripped off or the tails ripped off of the bait where you set the hook where you thought that he had it. So that's what makes, like, you know, tubes and small crawl baits and small finesse baits, you know, probably more effective at actually hooking the fish than some of these other baits. So let's go through some of these baits. You know, a creature bait, this is just a beaver, a creature bait, it has several appendages on it, but everything is kind of tight to the body. And this is a good bait. This is kind of like the fighting frog that Benton and Cook are throwing. It's just a kind of a different version of it. And you know, you could probably tear off these little side pieces right here, and it's not going to affect, you know, the interest of the bait at all to the fish. Then you have smaller baits, and let's talk about color too, because if you're in dingy water and you can't tell where your bait is in the bed, you're going to have a hard time presenting it to the fish properly. So once you get in dingy water, a lot of times people will throw like a white bait. This is just like a little pack or crawl. You know, there's a lot of different white baits that are made just, you know, basically for dirty water or bed fishing. And the advantage of that is it may not be the bait that triggers the fish the best, but it's a bait that you can throw in a dingy or dirty water situation and know that you've got it in the right place. And you can also tell when the fish grabs it because the white disappears. And then another bait that a lot of people throw for bedding fish, and this, I like to do it on the first cast a lot of times, is to throw a weightless Senko. And that gets a lot of bites on that first cast. But if you don't get them on the first cast, then a lot of times I'm going to add some weight to it, put it on a little shaky head or peg a bullet weight to it and throw it so that I can shake this bait in the bed. And a Senko works really good because there's no appendages here. He grabs it. And then another bait that I catch a lot of bedfish on, and you don't hear about it too much, is a jig. But see, you want a compact jig. This is a little compact jig. This is a little 1/4 ounce jig. It's got the short hook, the short weed guard, and a lot of times you would add to that compact jig either a small trailer or a crawfish trailer because they hate crawfish. But I would never throw that crawfish trailer like that. And the reason I wouldn't throw that crawfish trailer like that is it has way too many grabby spots on it for that fish to get. So if I'm going to throw that crawfish trailer on there, I'm going to rip the legs off on each side, and I'm going to rip the tentacles off on the other side. And then I'm probably going to cut it down and make it even shorter. So then I'm going to end up with something like this that I would then put on the jig, and we'll just thread it on there to show you what it looks like. And this is the modified jig. It's been, skirt's been trimmed, the regard's been trimmed and spread out, all the things that you do the right way. If you want to learn about how to prepare your jigs and fish them right, I've got a video on that on my site also. So now you've got a jig that looks like that. Very compact. Any decent size, self-respecting decent sized bass, when he sucks that in, he's pretty much going to get that hook. And then one of the final type of baits that I want to talk about for bed fishing is one that I've had a lot of success on when you really can't see the fish on the beds, but you know the beds are there. A bait that I've caught really big bags on over the years is a top water floating popping style bait. And now I'm not working this like you normally would work it. If I've identified that there's a bed at the base of that flooded gum tree on the side of that pocket, but I can't see the fish at all. You know, you may mystery drag a few things through there a few times. I'll throw that bait right on top of where I think the bed is, maybe pop it once and forget about it. Just let it sit there and sit there and sit there. I mean, up to like 30, 40 seconds. And then I might just give it just a little blip, and it's not moving at all. And that fish is gonna go, that fish up there is in my space and he's not moving, and you won't get very violent strikes on it at all. You'll get, basically, you'll watch that popping bait almost look like it just sinks. They literally will not hit it hard at all. And when that thing sinks, set the hook and you got him. And since it's so compact, he usually sucks on that feather. That feather, you know, gives him something to pull on and gets that back hook, and you got that fish every time. So those are some of the lures. Those are some of the ways to approach bed fishing, the techniques that you need to catch those fish. If you want to be a better fisherman, get out there right now, this time of year, you know, from most of the country, from the end of March through the middle of May, and find some clear water pockets somewhere with some hard bottom, sandy bottom. You know, you don't want a whole lot of rock, you know, for largemouth. For largemouth, you're looking for sandy areas. They're almost always going to spawn on sandy areas if they have them available to them. Get out there, spend some time on them, and you'll be a better bed fisherman. Again, I thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I please ask you to subscribe. Share it with your friends to help me grow the channel. And I appreciate you watching, and have a blessed day.